The play on the field, the courts, and the ice is just one part of sports. Behind every game are the people hard at work so we can enjoy the action. They're the owners, administrators, agents, broadcasters, and promoters who bring the games to life. Meet them when you go behind the game with Patrick Klinger. To Behind the Game, I'm Patrick Klinger, president of Agile Marketing Partners, making his Behind the Game debut. A man who's still bitter he wasn't a captain's pick for the Ryder Cup, Pete Eckerline. Pete, welcome to Behind the Game.
It's great to be here. I've been a fan of the show for a long time, and I really appreciate it. I'm excited to hear what Tom has to say today with his retirement coming up as the director of the Minnesota Golf Association. And I don't think a month goes by that I don't run into you at some charitable golf outing or Dunkers or some event. And on behalf of everybody in the Twin Cities community, thanks for everything you do for the Twin Cities, and it's a lot. So it's great to be here.
Yeah, very kind of you, Pete. You know, we're going to talk about one of our favorite topics, and that is golf. And we're going to do it with a man who's really been out front for the Minnesota golf industry for over 20 decades, or 20 years.
It feels like 20 decades sometimes, yeah.
And it's great to have you here, Tom. I just to jump right into it, 2 decades, retiring. I see every month or so when I get Minnesota Golfer, I love to read your column.
Great.
I've seen a bunch of MGA events recently at the Senior Amateur at Wayzata Country Club. And tell us what's next for Tom after you retire.
Well, I've got about 3 weeks officially left in the office, and then we'll be heading down to Florida for the winter. But I'll never be completely disengaged. You can't be. But so when we get down there, I'll probably play a little more golf. Actually looking at maybe volunteering a little bit for the Florida Golf Association. I have friends down there. But when we're back here in the summer, I really look to staying involved with the association on a volunteer basis as they need me. And also we just launched a foundation really in within the last year. And I've been asked to be part of that as a director. So I'm looking forward to that. So I'll still be around, although I promise the staff I'm not going to give any surprise visits into the office. I won't come unless I'm invited. But I'm looking at, once you're in golf, you're always in golf. So I'm looking forward to that.
Well, I'm sure the plane's going to be great because I know how busy you are. You don't probably get out as much as you'd like.
The great thing about the business is that, I do get a chance to play. A lot of it is business related. And I've had a chance to play in a lot of our championships, our senior events primarily over the years. So I do get out. I'm not going to say I don't, but I do get out, but it'll be a little more recreational in the future.
Yeah. That's great.
Tell us a little bit about your journey that led you to the Minnesota Golf Association.
Well, I worked at West Publishing, then Thompson, for 23 years. And going through that transition from West to Thompson was interesting. It's a whole different type of culture and management style. And after 23 years and 4 years of being with Thompson, I decided it was time to really kind of pursue other interests myself. So I left here, or I left Thompson, and then the opportunity came about. Julie Sproul, who was the executive director at the time, was leaving. I actually saw it in Charlie Walters' column and got on the phone that day and talked to a couple folks and said, do you know what the process is going to be for them selecting a new executive director? So I learned that, got my resume in, and was fortunate to get whittled down through the hiring process and got the job about 3 months later. I've been involved in golf my whole life. I started caddying at Town and Country, worked there through college, became an Evans Scholar at the University of Minnesota, played in MGA events over the years, and knew a lot of folks. Knew Rebbe, who was the executive director for a long time, Guy Green, who worked there, Tom Magny, who worked there. So I always knew a lot about the association. But it was really a dream job for me and for anybody who loves golf, and just the timing was perfect back 21, 22 years ago. And so I'll tell you, it's 21 years. If you think they can fly by in just doing anything, they've actually flown by for me. It's been great.
That's terrific. I was thinking about it when I was driving over here at the core, kind of what, I've been around a lot of different MGA events and stuff, but what does the Minnesota Golf Association do in this state to support it that's maybe some of our viewers aren't aware of?
Well, one of the most visible things we do is run our championships. So our state amateur, which is really how the purpose of the association when it was formed in 1901, was to run a championship for its members. Since then, we still run all the championships, men's and women's. We run USGA qualifying events, so we support the USGA in that respect. So that's very visible. If you're a golfer and you've heard about a handicap, we run that system and administer and support that system through all our member clubs. So that's primary. But we also support golf through our lobbyist at the Capitol. We retain a lobbyist. So anything that's going on within the state or down at the legislature that's going to impact golf, whether it's tax related, whether it's environmental, water, all of those any of those types of things, we're involved in that and support that. We're a liaison with the USGA, who's obviously the governing body. So we offer rules seminars. We do all the course rating, slope rating that happens around the state. We're the information clearinghouse. It used to be years ago when both papers had a golf writer on staff. John Rowe at the Star Trib, Greg Wong.
They used to list all the hole-in-ones and everything.
All that,
every event, City League, everything was
exactly.
in
All that kind of stuff was in the paper, and they picked it up. And then you had John and Greg and Mike Firmoil covering golf on a regular basis. That went away over the years as cost cutting went into, and sports departments were unfortunately part of that. Mike Firmoil was retiring from the MGA, or from the Pioneer Press, and came to us and said, I'd like to work for you and start covering your events. So every one of our events, every one of the PGA Sections events, any other Allied Association events, we have a reporter, was Mike, and now he's kind of stepped back. So Nick Hunter now covers all those. We take photos, we publish all that on our website. And it's interesting that the papers will pick up parts of those stories as we release them, and you'll see that in the paper, a paragraph or two. They'll also pick up the standings and the high school rankings, which everybody loves in the spring. They love, everybody looks at whatever sport it's going on. We publish those and compile those and publish them. They give us the credit, but that's a big deal. So what we're doing is we're really reporting on and being the information resource for golf, and there's a considerable amount of time and resource spent on that. In general, our mission is to promote the game and its values for all golfers. So we obviously have members at all the facilities, but we're really, everything we focus on is for the game overall, not just our members.
Right. One thing Patrick and I were talking about is, I remember prior to the pandemic, everybody was saying golf took too long, young people weren't interested, it's a dying game. And then all of a sudden the pandemic hit. The waiting lists at country clubs off the chart. You couldn't get a tee time, record numbers of rounds, and everybody in town's renovating their courses. Everyone's trying to be the best. You started out with Minnetonka, it's gone to Interlock and Golden Valley, everywhere. What do you think is the future now with all the pandemic's over? What do you think it looks like going forward for golf in Minnesota?
It's interesting in that, even going back to your first comment about it takes too long, it's too expensive, it's too hard. A lot of that was a little bit of a false narrative in trying to understand why the game was dying, in people's words, and clubs were closing. Well, it does take 2 hours if you play 9, 4 hours plus if you play 18. There is a cost involved. It's not the easiest game in the world. So all parts of that are true, but the fact is that there was and is so much competition for people's time and dollars. People were spending all their time at their kids' sports on the weekends and everything. So that all of that in society was changing from the times that we were growing up. If I saw my dad down on the right field line at a baseball game, that was great. Now you have parents at every practice. So it's kind of where
coaches love that.
Coaches love that, exactly. So I think really a lot of that was where people wanted to spend their time. The pandemic hit, and while we didn't know for several weeks where golf was going to go because courses were closed, we were in a little bit of a panic ourselves, but we were working behind the scenes to get golf open and did a good job with all the allied associations and with our lobbyists and our contacts at the Capitol to help facilitate that. What happened after that was, frankly, not only here but across the country, was a surprise to many people that the number of people playing and the number of rounds was going up. But the reason is that nothing else could happen. You weren't, youth sports were basically shut down. Restaurants and bars were shut down. So people were, what am I going to do with my time? And we showed the state and the powers that be there that we could operate in a healthy way, in a safe way.
Safe to be outside.
Safe to be outside.
Right.
We could handle it. So what's happened is, but what then people didn't know is what was going to be would that momentum continue and sustain itself? And it has. I mean, every year since, rounds have gone up in Minnesota and nationally. That first year, they went up from 19 to 20 with COVID. They went up 30% in Minnesota, which is huge.
Yeah.
Since then, they've gone up a little bit every year as well. So the interest is still there. No one's complacent. I think, if anything, our operators, not only at the public facilities, but private as well, the leadership at private clubs said nothing is forever, but we want to keep this going as long as we can. And so their marketing efforts, their programming, they're reaching out to kids, to women, to people of color, all those sorts of things, to developing more leagues, has really helped sustain it. It's hard to get a tee time at some places, and you got to be ready to play. But we really, we're not taking anything for granted. The industry is not complacent, but it's a great place to be right now, for sure.
Tom, is there a risk for the golf industry to become too expensive and too challenging to get a tee time? I mean, one of the things that seemed to have happened after Tiger Woods hit the scene was that a lot of people picked up golf, and they did go out,
Right.
and they found out it was taking 4 or 5 hours. They were shooting 110, and were spending $100 doing it.
Yeah.
They said, do I really need to do this? We're back in a boom period in the golf industry. How do you protect against the golf operators becoming a little bit greedy when everybody's wanting to get out and play again?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think it's something that they wrestle with all the time. And the same applies to private clubs in the same way. I think what they really have to do is they have to manage that cost benefit. I haven't seen anybody that's getting greedy in the sense of just raising their rack rates too much. What is really concerning, I think, is just the availability of time, and that if people can't get times, they turn away from the game. So that is a real challenge. Part of it is we haven't built any new golf courses in 15 years. And unfortunately, in the Twin Cities, the state that we live in, which is heavily focused with one large metro area, and then you get greater Minnesota, is where's the land to really build new courses. And so I don't really have the answer to that. Right now we're kind of at a place where we have a time for everyone, but the challenge is going to be how do we really provide a place for people still to play. Not everybody has the answer to that. I think individual operators it's still competitive too. So they're always looking down the street at what are they charging, what are we charging.
Right. A lot of competition.
There's a lot of competition for that golfer. The good thing is that we've got tons of kids that are playing. We've got tons of women that are entering the game, so the future looks good from that standpoint. But the availability is a challenge that probably has to really be considered and met. And it's going to be interesting because to build a new golf course takes a considerable commitment and resources, and not only in just financial, but in the land itself. You need 100+ acres for sure.
Well, when you look outside on a day like today where it's 48 degrees and rainy, we know that's a short season here in Minnesota. It's amazing that there's, I think, 450 courses in the state, and we are one of the leaders in per capita golf, I think, in the country. Why do you think that is in a state like Minnesota?
You know what? We're all Minnesotans, and once that snow is gone and it starts to thaw and it starts to, you get a few nice days, we can't wait. Whatever our passion is, we can't wait to get outside. And I think that's part of it. The first day that golf courses are open is some of the the first week or month is some of the busiest time of the year.
Absolutely, yeah.
But I think it's just it's the nature of us in Minnesota, whether it's in the upper Midwest, period. We're outdoor crazy. We love our outdoor sports. We love to be on the water. We love to be on the golf course. We love to be hunting and fishing as well in those seasons. So I think golf is popular here not because of the weather, but in spite of, almost in spite of it. And
I think you and I would attest to that. We get out there on some cold days.
yeah.
Absolutely. We've seen this great rise in golf during the pandemic. You mentioned the fact that no new golf courses have been built in the last 15 years. Getting a tee time is a challenge. That's led to additional use of simulators.
Right.
Do you view simulators as good for the game, or is that competition against the golf course operators you represent?
I think it's great for the game. I think any time you get a golf club in someone's hand, that's an opportunity. Top Golf is another example of something that, we've got Top Golf here. There's other versions of it across the country, but you go out there. I haven't been by there in a while up north, but
pretty crowded.
Every time I've driven by there, it's packed.
Yep.
And it's a little different aspect of it, but anytime you get a golf club in someone's hand, it's an opportunity, I think. And simulators are great because it's probably the closest thing to real golf. It's much more than Top Golf, obviously. A lot of clubs in town are adding them as an amenity for their golfers in the winter when there's snow on the ground. And we have found too, Patrick, with the kids, we know that the kids playing golf, when they hit 18, they head off to college. They're in school, there's other things going on. They're going to start a family when they get out of college or soon out of school. They're going to start a career. They don't have that disposable time, let alone income, to maybe spend on it. But because they've been exposed to it and have played a little as a kid, they'll come back. That was myself, for sure, and many others. So that's really where that next big wave is going to come from. We have a program called Youth on Course, which we have 16,000 kids in the program. We're the second largest program in the country behind Northern California, where it all started. And for $5 in membership, and then kid puts $5 on the counter, gets to play at a participating club. And we have over 100 public facilities that are participating.
Wow.
And then we, through our foundation, subsidize the balance between the junior rate and that $5. We're going to run 80,000 rounds through that program this year. Most are 9-hole rounds, actually, the kids. But it's buddies playing. I kind of attribute it's like sandlot baseball, where there's no rules. It's not structured. You're just going out. You've got a tee time with your friends or your family. And it's exposing all those kids to the game. And it's bringing mom and dad or grandma and grandpa along with them. And that's really where the future is. So hopefully we have a tee time for them when they turn 25.
Yeah,
but
that's right.
But the baby boomers, the question always was, what's going to happen to the game when the baby boomers are gone and can't play or don't play or whatever. And we're seeing it with the kids. There's an influx of young people playing that is probably more than the baby boomers were when we were growing up.
That's great. I see a lot of them playing on. Speaking of younger people and pros especially, these guys are bombing it. I just, watching the Ryder Cup recently, they're hitting at 330, 340. A lot of amateurs hit at 280, 300 yards. What do you think that's going to be the long-term effect? Obviously, the old days they'd play tighter, they'd lengthen the rough, narrow the fairway, lots of things you could do. And we saw with the Ryder Cup, America's got in those bad areas. If you're off that fairway, they had a little trouble hitting the greens. What do you think the future is with this? It just gets longer and longer, it seems, with the equipment and the balls and everything.
I think what we're seeing, well, they've already put restrictions on the driver. And now there's talk about a ball that would, but it's more for the elite and for the professional player rolling back the ball. So if you're that kid who still has a 15 handicap but can hit at 300, it's not going to necessarily impact you. But or you're a non-tournament player, there are limited number of clubs that are either have the land to get longer, build back tees, or the inclination to do so for a handful. So I think you're going to see a couple things. One is you're going to see the USGA really putting their foot down a little bit more, and it'll be interesting to see how this ball controversy comes out, because the tour's already said we don't want to abide by it. So now is the USGA going to really make it a rule or not? Right. There aren't as many. There are several courses here in Minnesota that can handle it. You know, Hazeltine, Olympic, Bear Path. I mean, there's, you know, Rush Creek. There's several that go back 7,200 yards plus that can handle those players. But we find it challenging even when we schedule our USGA qualifiers, because they want us to put a qualifying event on a course that is going to be equivalent to the course that they're going to play if they make it. Mm-hmm. And so we're kind of down to a handful when we get to.
A lot of members don't want to give up their course for 2 days and stuff. So that's always a negotiation as well.
It's always a challenge, but you know, they still haven't built a course that's too big for me. And
I'm okay still. I'm not worried. It's not something I'm worried about.
I know.
Patrick, are you?
And I
Not
think
so much.
I think for the handful of those players, because it is still, the game is still and the courses are still okay for the overwhelming majority. Those that, you know, Hazeltine attracts a young, low handicap member.
Right.
Just because of what
it's not
we just
fun for higher handicappers to play it. They're going to shoot
Olympic
130.
Olympic can put it back there, and they have a group. Windsong Farm. So a lot of those clubs, and then you've got the Rush Creeks and the Legends who have longer golf courses.
They can stretch it out.
So I think as they can, they will. But there's also that issue of if I'm at a club and we are considering some changes, do we make those changes for a select few, or do we try and mitigate that somehow and do something different? Right. So you'll see some longer tees that 10 people will play on. Mm-hmm. But I think the majority of golf courses are still fine for the majority of players.
I've always been curious why the PGA doesn't grow in the fairways and raise the rough, much like they do in the U.S. Open, for more tournaments.
Yeah.
And put more of a premium on accuracy rather than distance.
Yeah. You know, part of it is when you think about if you're preparing for a major championship on a golf course that doesn't host that many, like a Hazeltine, they'll make some changes that year for that week. Mm-hmm. A lot of the events you're watching every week on TV, they're coming every year. And so is the membership willing to accept a more difficult course? Because it's still the members' golf course. Mm-hmm. Are they willing to accept all those changes for 1 week a year? Because to play through them with the longer rough and everything is difficult for the general membership. So there's probably some of that negotiation going on. But the fact is, you know what? The public that's watching, the viewers that are watching these tournaments on TV like to see birdies too.
Right.
And they like the fact that these guys are hitting it. And women. I'll tell you, don't forget the
Absolutely.
women hit it. The top distance women hit it a long, long ways too. So even on that side, courses are probably more in line with their distance, but they still hit it too. But the men, people like to see birdies.
Yeah, I'd like to watch them hack it out, just like I do.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll never forget, I was the marshalling captain hole 10 at Hazeltine during PGA, and Sergio had one in the right rough. It's like the last day. It's like 10 inches deep. We could barely find it. He hacks out of there from about 170 yards with an 8 iron, hits it to like 3 feet. It's like they play a different game than we do.
They play a different game. It sounds like a different game. It's everything.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. One of the big issues facing golf courses these days is environmental issues. Mm-hmm. Golf courses use a lot of chemicals. They use a lot of water. Mm-hmm. How are golf courses in Minnesota specifically becoming more eco-friendly? You
know what? This is another thing we talked about that's a little bit of a myth. It's not true. It's absolutely true. They have to use some herbicides and pesticides and everything to manage the turf, growth regulators, all those sorts of things that a lot of us use it some commercial way in our yard. And the use of water. People drive by a golf course and see these sprinkler irrigation systems just spewing all this water and think, geez, that's a ton. The fact is the superintendents on most of these courses are so well trained. I mean, they're scientists, number one. They've got the top technology, number two. And the way they manage it is in a way that if we all manage our yards like that, it'd be great. turf management is really a science, and they're very, very good at it. But it is an issue, and it is something that not only at the USGA level, but the Superintendents Association nationally and statewide is very, very concerned about. Sustainability is one of the real challenges that the game has going forward. How do we use less water and still maintain a playing surface that people want to play on? As much as we'd like to admit it personally or say is that, it doesn't matter really how a golf course is maintained, I just love to play. The ones that get the rounds and the ones that get the members and the ones that people want to go to are the ones that are green and turf, and the greens are good and the fairways are good. So how do we do that with fewer dollars and with less water? There's a lot of different grasses that are being developed that can be managed with less chemicals and less water. You see courses being regrassed on a regular basis. We've talked about some of those. But it is one of the real challenges with the game, and the USGA, the superintendents are putting a ton of resources into developing strategies and programs that will address that. But I do tell people that probably the most highly educated person at most clubs is their superintendent, the guy driving or woman driving around with work boots on a Cushman. Yeah. That's a person you want to be friends with. That's the number one hire at many courses, to be honest.
Yeah. That's a thankless job a lot of days.
And it is a thankless job because your work is front and center for everybody, and you can't
control the environment either.
You can't control the environment, and a guy named Brian Horgan, who used to be the director of the turf research at the University of Minnesota, and is now at Michigan State. He's one of the top people in his field in the country, if not the world. Always said a favorite statement: Mother Nature always wins, always wins. But you do what you can to help along the way.
Yeah. Tom, this conversation went by way too quickly. Way too quickly. Pete, you were terrific.
Thank you. It's great to be here with you, Patrick.
Come on back.
This has been really fun.
Anytime.
Yeah.
Hey, congratulations on an extraordinary career.
Well, I appreciate it. Like I said, the time has 21 years has gone way too fast, and I'm just hoping that my successor, my replacement who's coming in, has as much fun as I've had. I'm sure he will, but has as much fun, and it'll be a great opportunity.
Well, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you. It's been great.
It's
been a lot of fun.
Thanks. Terrific.
Thank you, buddy.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tom.